Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta, and today I'm going to show you how to make this apple raisin cinnamon sourdough loaf. So if you want to see how to make this sourdough loaf, keep watching the video, and if you want to see more sourdough recipes from me, let me know in the comments as well. Now for the dough, you're going to need 100 to 150 grams of your active starter, 100 grams of rye flour, 400 grams of whole wheat flour, 10 grams of salt, 250 grams of water, 250 grams of applesauce, and about 100 grams of raisins. Now I'm going to start by mixing together my active starter with my water until it's completely mixed together. At this point, we can go ahead and slowly mix in our 2 flours and our applesauce. We're going to set our raisins and our salt aside for now because we're not going to need that until later. Now my applesauce already has a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of sugar in it. If you want to sweeten your bread a little bit more, you can always go ahead and add about 20 grams of honey or agave or anything along those lines. Our dough has come together quite nicely. Yours might look a little bit more shaggy, which is totally okay. It's not going to make a big difference. So at this point, we're going to cover it and let it rest for 30 to 60 minutes before we add in our salt. And this part is called the autolyse. Now while our dough is resting, we can go ahead and rehydrate our raisins so they don't steal all the moisture out of our bread. So because I'm using 100 grams of raisins, I'm going to be using 200 milliliters of boiling water. And I'm just going to let this sit until we're ready to do our stretch and folds. Our dough is rested for about 30 minutes. So at this point, we can go ahead and mix in our salt. Now you can mix this by hand or you can use a spatula like this. I'd say the salt is pretty much mixed in. So at this point, we can get to doing our stretch and folds. So over the next 2 hours, we're going to do 4 sets of stretch and folds that are each 30 minutes apart. That basically just means you're going to take a corner of your dough, pull it up, fold it over, and do that until you've done all 4 corners. And that basically just builds some tension and some gluten in your dough. Now this part can get a little bit messy if you have a sticky dough, so I always recommend getting your hand a little bit wet before you go into your dough. I'm going to cover it and let this rest for the next 30 minutes, and then on our second stretch and fold, we're also going to go ahead and add our raisins. It's been 30 minutes and we can do our second set of stretch and folds. So at this point, we're also going to sprinkle on our drained raisins before we fold it in. Once again, this is going to rest for 30 minutes before we do our third and then our final fourth stretch and fold. And as you can already tell, every time you do your stretch and fold, your dough gets a little bit more elastic and a lot easier to work with. We just did our fourth and final stretch and fold, so at this point we can let it bulk ferment. That basically just means we're going to put it at a warm spot for the next 2 to 3 hours to let it rise. Now, depending on how warm it is where you're letting your dough proof, it's going to go quicker or slower, so just keep an eye on it. You basically want it to almost double in size, and you want it to be not too sticky to the touch. Now, while our dough is doing its bulk fermentation, we can go ahead and prep our cinnamon butter that we're going to use to layer our bread. So for that, you're going to need 50 grams of butter. I'm just using softened butter, so it's a little bit easier to mix everything into it. 50 grams of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of flour, and I'm also using a little pinch of nutmeg. Now, once again, you can take out or add any other spices that you think will go good. But essentially, all we're going to do is mix everything together until we have a paste, and we're just going to set that aside until we get to shaping our dough. It's been like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and our dough has definitely doubled in size. It's looking pretty fluffy like this. It's not too sticky to the touch, which is perfect. So at this point we can get to pre-shaping. I'm just gonna start by flouring my surface just a little bit and just transferring my dough out of my bowl. Now, to pre-shape, we basically just want to add a little bit of tension to our dough. So we're just going to use a dough card like this and gently try shaping it into a ball. Now that we've got a pretty nice ball like this, we're going to flour a little spot on our surface, and we're just going to plop our dough right on there. We're gonna let that sit for about 15 minutes to rest. It's been about 15 minutes, so at this point we can move on. So I'm just going to take my dough ball and I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to slightly stretch it out into a square shape. Now we can gently spread our cinnamon butter all over the inside of our square. Now, it is easiest to do this if this is a little bit thicker like this. You don't want it to be as liquid as it was in the beginning. Now to shape this, we're going to start by folding in our top edge and then both sides. And from here on, we're going to roll it up nice and tight and then place it into our banneton. Now at this point, you can either cover it and stick it into the fridge overnight to cold ferment, or you can let them proof for another hour, hour and a half at room temperature before baking them. So it's been about an hour and a half and our dough has definitely proofed a little bit more. It's super fluffy now. So at this point, all that's left to do is transfer it onto some baking mats and then score it. Now I also sprayed my dough with some water just to give it a little bit more of a shine and so it's not so floury, but that's totally optional. And I also recommend doing one big score down the middle and nothing too fancy on the sides. Now I preheated the oven as well as my baking trays to 230 degrees Celsius or 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now there's many different ways that you can bake it. You can bake it in a Dutch oven or just open bake it like I'm going to do. The bread's now going to bake at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 minutes. At that point, I'm going to rotate my trays so that the bottom tray is at the top and the top one is at the bottom. If you're baking your bread in a Dutch oven, this is also the point where you're going to take off your lid. And then for the remaining 20-25 minutes, we're going to reduce the heat to 420 degrees Fahrenheit. Once your bread has baked for the 55 minutes, I recommend using a thermometer to see if your bread is completely baked through. You basically just want the internal temperature to be between 96 and 98 degrees Celsius. And there's our apple raisin cinnamon sourdough loaf. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, you can give me a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well. I'll see you in the next video.